So Bannockburn it is, and that shouldn't be a surprise if you knew the games that are in here and your history sequence a little better than I was thinking of. In particular, it strikes me as quite obvious that Edward III's son, the Black Prince, is going to come after Edward II at Bannockburn, but you know, sometimes we have trouble. One thing I wanted to mention, this is really more of a general thing, but for whatever reason, my copy of this, although it's the boxed game, is folded as if they were the folio games that were put in it. It just has an extra fold, and you know these also have a fold in them, which is usually not the case with the boxed SPI games. My guess is, you know, they had more boxes than they thought they did, or folded more folios than they should have, or something, and whatever. All right. So if you remember with Men of Iron, I don't know. I mean, if you follow my series from long, long ago. When I first played Men of Iron, I played Bannockburn and was rather disappointed with it because not only did the English win, which, hey, you know, maybe, I felt the game was actually slanted in their favor. I'm hoping this one works out a little better. Let's take a look at of course, maybe I made an error, but it felt in favor of the Brits. Okay. So what differences are there? Well, first of all, you have to have your friendly map edges. And for the English, it's this slice here. For the Scots, it's 0119 to 0134 to here. And then the rest of the corner goes out to 1433, which is here. So it's kind of a slice of the corner there. And I may have to look these suckers up while playing, just because, who knows. There are double space bow units, a couple of Scottish ones and an English one. And these suckers have a special rule where they can fire in any direction. But their movement and any other rules applying to them is governed as if they were a normal double unit. The English longbow, that's these guys. If they're 2 hexes away from a Scottish unit and the intervening hex is occupied by English cav of the same division that's not charging and that's not, I believe it has to be same division. No, that's not routing and that's not charging. Oh no. Yeah, that's not routing or not charging. It can fire over its head. If it does so, even though it's 2 hexes away, it's going to fire at a range of 3. And there's a penalty if it's not the same division in terms of coordinate. There are 3 divisions in the Allied force: Herefordshire, Clifford, and Edward's own division. And these are going to match the archers and the cavalry. The infantry back here is not divided into divisions, and neither is the crossbows, the Gascon crossbows. Marshes. You can't cav charge through marshes. That's not too surprising. Everything has to spend an extra movement point for whatever maneuver it's doing in the marshes. There is an exception to this, though, which is these pikemen. And they're calling them skiltrons, actually. I thought that was actually the formation, the circular formation that the pikes used. Taking that from Men of Iron. If I get energetic, I may look that up. But it may have been a double use thing, meaning both the formation and the unit. So both may be correct in their own way. They're able to slog through the marshes, no matter what their formation, without paying a penalty. Okay. Some of the units have different modes. In fact, a lot of them do. These guys, for example, can turn into melee units. We'll get to the Skiltrons in a moment. Same with these guys. The Gaskins, I believe, can do the same. And the Scottish cavalry can dismount. For the Scottish cavalry, they pay, I believe, their full movement allowance, so they can't do anything else, and they dismount, and then they're dismounted for the rest of the game. For the Gascon crossbow, it pays 6 to change mode, which is its movement, but it can switch back and forth between. Okay. What is not covered is the other bow units, which maybe should not be allowed to change, or maybe they spend 6 to do so. I'll look for some errata to see if I can find that out. Any Scot and any English can rally their own forces. You'll see, unlike in King Arthur, we just have one number on them. That's their movement allowance. This is standard rules here. English longbow. For the English longbow to fire at full effectiveness, it has to be in command control. In order for it to do that, it has to be adjacent to an unrouted cavalry of the same division, 2 hexes away from an unrouted cavalry of the same division, with the intervening hex empty or filled with an archer. There's further, but it's actually not important. Or if the longbow is stacked with the leader from its division. If it's not in command control, it gets a 2-point penalty on the fire combat results table. The Skiltrons. Okay. So the deal with these is that they can change mode as well, but they don't flip over. They get smaller and tighter. They can collapse into either of their hexes. They can expand out into any adjacent hex. And remember, facing doesn't matter for single counter units, so they can expand into any of the 6 hexes that they're in. I think it costs them only 2 movement points to switch formation, and they can do that during their own movement. Skiltrons have their own rank in here, and infantry. Oh, there must be some infantry with no armor. Unfortunately, I don't see. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, there's some really crappy Welsh and Irish infantry back there that doesn't have armor. Great. Okay. So, when the Skiltron is being melee attacked while it's in close formation, it gets a 2-point benefit because the pikes are close together and they're defending themselves. And when it attacks in close formation, it gets a 2-point bonus because of the impetus of a pike formation. However, it's in close formation and it's attacked with fire combat, there's a 2-point penalty against it because they're so packed together, it's easier to hit them. And remember, penalties might be are generally positives. Well, it depends on the situation. Like a penalty against a defender is a negative. It makes them easier to hit. Okay, so all these English infantry are disorganized to begin with. They have another side. In general, their disorganized side has a lousy morale comparatively. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. The English player can attempt to organize them. During their movement phase, instead of moving, they roll a die. If it's a 1 or 2, the unit has organized and is able to operate normally for the rest of the game. It will never become disorganized again. Disorganized units have a movement allowance of 2 once fatigue is in effect if they're still disorganized. Okay. At the end of 10 turns, you judge victory. Robert the Bruce is 30. All the other Scots leaders are 6. See the points for the other units. Edward's only worth 10. Other English leaders worth 2. And obviously the Scots subtract the Brits, and they need about a 20-point bonus. Now, because the point values for these, unlike in Arthur, look to be completely different, like Cav is worth 5, it's about twice as much. King Edward's worth 10, Robert the Bruce is worth 30. I'm not sure, but yeah, it looks like the Brits, point values are just totally different, and I'm not sure why they chose these values. Perhaps with a replaceability type idea, the English could build another army pretty easily. I'm not so sure the Scots couldn't throw up a bunch of Highlanders again, though. Certainly in other periods, they were able to form armies again. So I don't know. Anyway, so it's very hard to tell, what the balance works out to here. But obviously, the Scots have to do something to win the game. So theoretically, they're on the offensive because the English could sit back and win. How big a deal is that? I'm not sure. Historically, the English did attack, and they probably don't really need to. We got our lances in the game, which you may have noticed before. I've got to look up to see, errata, whether or not those bowmen can actually turn into little melee units. I'm not sure how big a deal it is. Obviously the Gascons can, but the others, how do we treat them if they are? No clue. Right then, I couldn't find any errata dealing with anything for this game, actually. I looked in Grognard's, I looked at BGG. I didn't look in my box, but I don't think there is one. So I'm going to just assume that these archers can flip as though they're the Gascons. Full movement point cost to turn into a fighting formation. How big a difference is it? It's not much. These are not guys that you really want to engage with using melee combat. I can't imagine that you'd want to tell you the truth. But historically, at Agincourt and some other battles, the bowmen did, grab whatever weapons they had at hand and engage directly. And in fact, the fact that they can't do that in the Arthur scenario is probably something of a historical flaw. But, whatever, that game has its own reality. But again, I don't think you'd be doing it. Let's take a look at the missile fire here. Well, with the short bow, because these are the guys most likely to do it. 2 to 4 going down. Yeah, they've got better capabilities. They get to shoot before melee. It probably was a misprint in order. I don't know. Of course, there's the question of why you would do it with the Gascons either, though. They're pretty crappy. Whereas on their other side, well, they only count as light infantry. They're medium weight here, which is, I guess, the Pavis or whatever kind of shield they're using here. But as light infantry, well, they're no better. but their chart is actually pretty good. Uh, you know, actually this is, let's see, medium or light infantry hitting even plate cav hit on a 2 through 6. That's pretty damn good. Huh. I wonder what I was thinking. Yeah. They may well want to engage. It's a hard call because you probably wouldn't do it with the longbowmen. Their chart is better, but the shortbow, their chart's not all that good, especially against the heavy armor. And if they go charging in and attacking, they can cause more damage, especially if it's already a routed unit, i.e., one with the numbers on it. Well, and this kind of fits the idea of going in there with your maul or your dagger or whatever and finishing off the knights. You're not going to get attacked, so you don't really get the benefit of that first fire. So it actually looks kind of interesting. Okay. Anyway, who goes first? We didn't bother to see that. Scots. And I'll try to figure out what I'm doing. It's worth I'm pushing forward, trying to get a rush on because of the English infantry back here. Wise, I don't know. Danger here. I've pushed Keith's cav forward. The longbows could run in, get it in range, do a lot of damage there, but they're not going to be associated with their wing unless I try to maneuver the cav and the longbows and integrate each other. The fact that the Brits are kind of off balance right now seems to me a good reason to charge in. The other danger, there's this one cav unit that's been put forward, and I'm now in range to be hit by it. I've got my Shiltrons in open order, which means they're a little bit vulnerable. Yeah, I like to take chances. Edward tries to consolidate his cav over here. Shifts a big charge against the Scottish right. The danger. There's a possibility of Scottish cav charge. Slamming into my cav before I get to get up. Attempts to recuperate. Got a few units. Hey, I haven't moved my Gaskins. What do I want to do with them? Let's just push them forward. Stuck in the middle of the swamp like that, they can't do much. And cav charge was actually fairly successful. Sheltron's hard to hit, even when they're in open order. But 4 extra points for charging lance, hey, that's 2 through 9, that's pretty likely. And then kicking over to here, yeah, they're on the A morale table, but there's 2 points for the lance and 1 point for sneaking a unit behind them. So they did pretty well. These guys didn't charge, so they haven't used up their lance. And now we go to the route movement. And Robert's turn. Voltron and the rest of the infantry pull together, and they're gonna hope that they're as kick-ass as I think they are. Now comes the question of Keith's cav, which is actually pretty kick-ass too. Again, A morale units. They have their lances. If I don't charge, the longbows will probably eat me up. If I charge, I'm going to use my lances up. That's okay if I'm hitting cav. It's not so good if I'm hitting longbowmen. So I could hit 3 of the cav, maybe, It'd be a good first strike. It'll really break up the Allied or the English line. But I probably don't want to charge with my other cav, so I'll probably slide them in as a reserve, I think. I'm not sure. That charge was pretty effective. These guys ended up out of command because I pushed a cav into their hex that they needed to be in the special longbow command or whatever. However, the Shiltron did not do anywhere near as well as expected, and it did prove kind of impervious to the cav, though, so I guess it ended up as something of a wash, but I was hoping to hit those calves pretty hard. That's going to put it back on the British turn, and we got these retreats to take care of, but first, we do rally these guys. And I have a feeling that if they don't get moved, and I did try to hit these damaged units, because they're much easier than when the Shiltrons turn into their little dense pike formations. If those guys don't get hit fairly quickly, we're going to be in more trouble. English Cav charge into the Lancer. They're still lance-armed units. The bow is not effective. None of them were able to get in command. I forgot about something. I set them all up so that they were in command, except they're not, because it's only unrouted units. Although this unit, actually this one was in command, which means this one was in command. I'll reroll one attack. That sounds like a fair option. So this is longbow range 2 against mail armored. Okay, I did not get a hit anyway, so it stands as it is. You can see the English infantry beginning to recover or get itself organized, but it's not terribly valuable. I mean, we take a look, the best ones are lightly armored C morale units, and that's the cream. You know, we get down here and it's non-armored E morale units. Oh wait, here's some Irish and mail with a B morale. That's pretty good. Okay, so I was wrong about the cream. Now we're going to be getting on Robert's chance to swing back with the Shiltron, and he's going to be able to do quite a bit of damage, I think, here. They're so flexible because they're small counters, and they have such good to-hit ratings, etc., such good morale. They more than make up for the cav charge advantage. It's kind of a little weird because if you start to think about, well, they do have the penalty against bow fire when they're in that position, so, and that's probably the most effective thing to do to a pike formation. So one thing that I was thinking about was this, the slow English cav is actually capable of running, and we saw this, running back 3 hexes, running forward 3 hexes. One of the things is you don't have the impetus of a later cav charge in the medieval era. In the very late medieval era, you start getting that. But here, the goal isn't always to smash through the enemy. And especially, you know, when you're facing pikes, if you don't break them, the most likely thing you do is you turn, run back, reform, and come back for another charge. You don't stay in there trying to hack your way through the pikes for the most part. So I'm not too bothered by this system from what I can see so far. The Arthur scenario is, I don't know, I mean, you know, it's made up. So how much can you really object to it? It's certainly not meaning to be a Dark Ages battle. It's meant to be the idealized chivalric battle with the man-to-man combat and all this, that, and the other. All right. Set of the turn. Keeps cav. What's left? Unrouted. Charged back. Shiltrons moved forward. No effect on any of these. Over on this side, well, we harmed this more. You can see the Shiltron pushed forward. All the routing units, except for this guy, got a leader on top of them, so they'll rally very shortly. I got one of the cav here. Really, really unimpressive. The British cav got hit all over the place. They just made their morale checks consistently. And now we go to the British side of turn 3. Technically the English side of turn 3, since these are all Britons. I forgot the English get a chance to swing back. I doubt it'll have much effect, but might be able to pop something like this and hurt it a little harder. Comes to an end with a whole lot of nothing going on. There was one British charge, or one English charge, I don't remember which one. They brought their longbows up, which are probably the most effective thing against the Shiltron, but the problem is we got to have the cav in place to command them. So we've got the cav slipping back around. In general, they're hitting cav because they're effective at that, which means the longbows are closer to the cav. So I want to shoot them. But those potent Shiltrons are just, pretty invulnerable, but the high morale levels and the low to hit rates for anything except Shiltron against plate cav, well, against anything really, but they're especially good against the cav. Means a lot of missing has happened. See the English infantry beginning to actually move forward. They may get involved in this battle, but maybe not. I mean, historically, most of them didn't make it. All right. Scott's turn. Well, those once potent Shiltron units, a lot of them got shot up pretty hard coming in against the bows. Yeah, there's knights, etc. in the way too, but the bows are really doing a number on them, as they should. And I'm beginning to think about using my cav to try to disperse the longbowmen, because the Shiltrons are just not capable of handling them properly. Of course, the problem with that is I kind of don't want to use my lance guys, and they were the ones who were free. I could have made attacks with them, but I think I'm going to focus more on the bowmen than I have been. They've just been too potent. And now we go over to the English side. Brings us up to the end of turn 4. You can see the English infantry actually starting to try to have an effect on the game. The archers had less of an effect this turn. They're harder on attack, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to tell because basically I had to get out of the way of charging cav, which is the main problem. So I ended up with less shots. You can see some of the Shiltron are shot up though, but on the other hand, some of the cav are not in great shape. And now this will throw it back into Robert's paws. And I need something to eat. That noise, by the way, that's a little wood stove going. I think the fire's mostly out in it. Can't see anything of it anymore, so I should turn that off. And after this rout phase, the first of the English, the first of the pieces to score, has left them out. You can see Robert's trying to rally his own forces, which are pretty badly mauled in terms of, but a lot of charges, cav charging, trying to get the bowmen out of the way. They're the biggest danger. The Shiltron's actually spreading out where they're too close to the bowmen. They're still not bad against plate units, but they don't get to hit if they get shot on the way in, so it's kind of important. Pretty hard hit all across the board. You can see a number of the Scots got hit, but they also destroyed one of the bowmen and hurt some of the other units. This system seems to be about trying to overwhelm the command capability to rally units. And it's a nice perspective. I mean, it's one I haven't really seen before. Usually you're trying to cause casualties and whatnot. Here you're trying to get enough units in a routing situation, which isn't really a full rout because they can recover. So that, above 4 is the full rout when they get moved off the board or when they leave the battlefield. So that the commanders can't rally all the units and more units start falling further and further back. That can gain you ground or leave the enemy with too few units in the front. And it can also get you points as units, run off the map, or you're able to pick off the already running units. Anyway, it's an interesting perspective for a game, one that I don't think I've seen anything quite like it, where you're trying to get... Great Battles of History comes the closest, where you're trying to get enough enemy units, in this horrible status that the enemy's really not able to recover, and you're getting within their command, their ability to turn their command. Using the wrong words here, but I don't know the right ones right now. Anyway, onward. Sometimes have to be careful moving your units, because to get these charge zones built up where you can turn around, run back, and come in for another sweep, you got to do things like move your infantry out of the way before you can launch the charges, which is kind of cool too. English seem to have given pretty good to the Scots this time. We got a couple lucky hits on these Shiltrons here. And, yeah, I mean, the crap infantry got hit, even though, coming in, this isn't really a flank attack because these guys have all around facing, so, but still, coming in like that. Oh, and one other interesting thing, I don't know if I think it was visible, but I changed those Gaskins to infantry mode. I'm not sure if that's valuable or not. They have a better chance to hit, but they're automatically given a chance to fire if they're in bow mode. And fighting bow versus bow, that seems worthwhile. The other option, if I wasn't in the swamp, I could have backed up, because the further the range, the better the crossbows are comparatively. And they fire at the same range no matter what. But I felt like, well, there's no reason to discard the Pavises and, get into melee mode if it's not to chop up short bowmen. I mean, I really can't think of any other time you'd want to do this. And it's the fact that I'm in the swamp that made me do it at all. It looks like a pretty questionable option, as I would assume turning, other bowmen into melee mode would be. Get a pretty good turn here. Cav charges have done some definite disruption against that English infantry, which is pretty questionable to begin with. The problem is these are more things that are getting disrupted, so it gives more work for the leaders to handle. On the other hand, it is tying down that cav, which can be pretty effective against the bows, and allowing the bows to kind of concentrate along with the English cav against the Shiltrons, which are a little tougher to cope with. And you can see the Shiltrons have done their damage as well. And it's route time, I guess. Moving to turn 7. The English infantry's actually done a pretty good job. Cleared out a couple of those cav. You can see the Shiltrons all disorganized now, and will be falling back. It's going to be kind of tough for the Scots this turn to mount a really effective attack. Normally they can slap one in. They've got some cav back here that can, make some charges, but otherwise this whole flank is pretty bad shape. This guy's going to take an extra hit sneaking back, and then I can slam one in. I don't have any cav over here, which is a shame, because that's where the archers have all gone. They've run away from the Scots cav. Launched a fairly ineffectual sequence of attacks. The Shiltrons here, knights charging here. They all kind of failed. These guys got hit in return. Some of the archers did some additional damage to units already routing. Was not a good turn for him at all. Back over to Edward. Edward launched a pretty impressive looking charge. I don't know how much effect it really had. He didn't do anything to these guys, which were just sitting there waiting to get hosed. He got these short bowmen, and I think a cav here, and this. Didn't do much with the... I got a hit I forgot, or a couple of units I forgot about. Plate mail versus a Shiltron that's like a 2 through 5 because it's a charging plate. And I hit, but the modifiers don't come into play because I don't have a lance. So, is there a single? Nope. Okay. Which means the Shiltron gets to come back with its like 2 through 9 against the plate on it. Which hits and does a point of damage. Okay. And I think we moved the game turn marker up. Yeah, so I didn't really get as much effect as I would have liked out of it, but, you know, I knocked one of the leaders out along with a unit. That's always a good thing. And there are a fair number of routing Scots. The problem really is, this is the only points accumulated in this battle so far. It's been sort of a non-battle in terms of casualties. Unlike the Arthur one where we had casualties, well, a lot of Arthurian casualties. And that's mainly because I wiped out the leaders, so there was no command control. Here, there's enough space. The battle's happening kind of, you know, nothing's all that fast, so units aren't running that fast. Yeah, the Scott Cav runs fast. That's the only stuff. So I'm not sure the victory conditions really work with this as well. I feel like I'm getting an inconclusive battle as opposed to something where the damage that's been done to the Scots really is being reflected at all, but we'll see. I gotta play with my interwebs. I'm trying to get a rationalized solution here, and finally found that I could get it running up here in the loft, which is kind of cool because now it blankets the house a little better. And the biggest thing is, it means that I can use one of the baseboard heaters downstairs that I wasn't able to use, but now I've got like things that I have to fix with the coax, but whatever. And Robert's not able to do a whole hell of a lot here. I mean, he stuck a lot of units in, but not enough damage to do much. Some male infantry. The problem is, what do I, you know, yes, I'm ahead in points here. One plate and one. So one of Edward's cav is worth 5, and an infantry is worth 2. That's 7 points I've collected. I might get a few more. I need to get 20-point differential. And this battle clearly hasn't gone, you know, it hasn't gone clearly enough in the Scots' direction to get them any kind of victory, really. They're going to be looking at probably a fairly, maybe a substantial, maybe a marginal English victory. Why? Because those bows are pretty damn potent at stopping the Shiltron. Now, you could argue I've done something ahistorical, keeping the cavalry, the Scots cavalry, active as cav for the entire battle. Historically, I believe they dismounted partway through. I don't see much advantage to that, though. Yeah, they're a little better against the plate cav. Sort of, maybe. But the difference is they can do the charges, which gives them... It works out to be kind of a wash, because they hit better on defense if they're, you know, flipped over. But they don't get any better, particularly they get slower, which means they run less far, I guess. But I'm not seeing too much advantage to dismounting them. Other than that, you know, careful use of those bowmen can pretty much blunt the attacks, and there's enough English leaders to rally the forces. Now, it's only capture or elimination. We'll see. When the fatigue turns come, maybe worse things start happening. But as of right now, it actually looks to me, you know, like the English are pretty much given as good as they get. They just got overwhelmed early on, I think. All right, on to their turn. And Edward's infantry beginning to have some effect now. You know, I mean, I don't feel too bad saying that this looks like an English victory, even though they've taken casualties and whatever. Just as a matter of, yeah, they're coming out of a situation where they had a lot of negative effects and not doing all that badly overall. In terms, though, of is this accurately modeling? Is it too easy for the English to kind of do okay? Well, I don't know. We'll see. It certainly does seem, though, that at this point the Scots are taking more damage than they're giving, to tell you the truth. They weren't able to do much on their turn. And you can see a lot of their stuff needs to be rallied. Because he's able to go first, Robert has a slight advantage here, which is, hey, upgraded fatigue penalties. I may have moved too quickly. Like getting off a charge I shouldn't have and whatever. Well, I'll try to remember that. But I did do the morale penalties, and got a couple of hits on the English line. I don't know how much it matters. Like, maybe I should be trying to pick off units, see if I can get the victory level higher, because there aren't, a lot of turns here. But I'm still kind of worried that the English are going to be able to pick off my units, so it may be kind of a, even either way. Speaking of the Schiltron, this game gets it right in the sense that the Schiltron is the pike formation in general. Forming a circle, though, as described both in the historical for this, I think, but also for the Men of Iron, the Schiltron forming a circle was their defense against Cav. So basically, if Cav is attacking them, that's probably what you're seeing. When they're attacking, that's not what you're seeing. They're coming down like a regular pike formation, slamming into them. All right, as we push into the end turn, not a lot. Trying to trigger this guy so he falls over the edge. It's not going to happen now. I mean, it might. I still got another English turn, but this guy's going to go, though. So there's some points. I killed some bowmen. And definitely did a little bit of damage. That makes it really tough for Robert to get any kind of points this turn. He doesn't have a lot. There's not a lot of likelihood towards units being able to charge. Now, the Scott Cav can, but so this guy can pull back one and slam into that or something. But it's really tough for the English to do that. They basically have to be set up the 3 hexes away, because half movement, they just don't have enough. And the Schiltrons, well, some of them are just too far away to do anything. This one, I think I forgot to move last time. But such is life, right? For the most part, Robert's last gas, not very good for him. The archers were able to take out a bunch of the Schiltrons there too. And then I don't know, we had our retreat over here. There was another English, one of the Cav units took out one of the English garbage infantry, actual garbage. Before we took out the best infantry, the Irish. Now we're taking out absolute crap, but it's all worth the same. They're 2 points each either way. Obviously, taking the good thing out is good if you do it early, but it was fairly late in the game, and I don't know how much effect it had. All right, well, the English have one chance to try to rack up some score here, and we got some retreats. And as is the case often in time-bounded games, you had some really gamey maneuvers at the end with the English bow marching right up to shoot, because the worst that happens is we get disorganized, a route factor or something, but we're not getting a 4 route factor. The most the table ever gives is 3 off one thing, so if you're kind of careful, you can ensure that you won't be damaged, or you won't take victory points. That's one thing to say in favor of Great Battles of History, Men of Iron, I think, as well. Although in both cases, I think there's some scenarios that have a time limit on them, but for the most part, they're just, the battle's going to happen. One of the problems, though, is with medieval battles, and you kind of see it here, they did fight until they couldn't fight no more. It wasn't always to a rout. And so you kind of have to play around with that idea. If neither side routes after a certain amount of time, unless you're willing to just say time doesn't really matter, it's a totally abstract thing. But it does matter. After a certain amount of time, the armies can't fight anymore, hence the fatigue values. And, maybe it's time for the day to end. And instead of what you'd normally see in that case, which is sporadic fighting going where the fighting's still happening, here you've got this kind of, game's over, man. Let's count the points. Well, let's count the points. I think the Scots actually ended up with less points. So we got 10 for a Schultron infantry, right? 2 cavalry, that brings us up to 30, and an infantry, 34. Whereas the English lost, 1 cav, just 5, and 6 in infantry, 11. Which means we got less than 0, decisive English victory. The net effect of that is the castle is saved. And, basically if Edward had this army still there, even an indecisive type of result more or less means he's going to be able to relieve Stirling Castle, and that means, well, Scotland continues to be a war, This is close to the end of the Scottish Liberation War. If this huge English army was able to be victorious, or even run things kind of close, it's going to be really tough for the Scots to keep fighting in the lowland area, and they're going to have to fall back to the Highlands and whatever, years more or whatever happens. Anyway, it was kind of interesting, but I'm not sure I feel like this gave all that much more of a valid view. It's still a tough slog for the Scots to win this one. Maybe I'm missing something major, but they've got to take the offensive in order to get the score. So they can't just sit back and let the Brits kind of, expose themselves or whatever. You basically can't lose any Scots units. Their leadership advantage, it's there, but it's not enough. And probably the best thing for the English is to keep most of this crappy infantry from even showing up. But the further forward the English are able to push things, the longer they have to retreat, the easier it is for them to rally their forces. And same as they push the Scots back, the harder it is for the Scots to rally their forces. Not entirely reasonable. Edge of map rules, always kind of clunky. Still, it's an interesting system, and it's kind of neat to see it play out without all those stupid hand-to-hand combats. The Arthur one really was way too much die rolling. The system still has a lot of die rolling and a lot of fiddliness with dealing with these, little route markers, and all the units running back and then coming forward again and all that kind of stuff. But in a lot of ways, I like what the system does. This seems to be a hard battle for a designer to implement in a way that at least I can see a way for the Scots to win. I don't know. They have a lot of advantages here. High morale. Their units really kind of kick ass. But, high morale. The penalties for the archers hitting the Schultrons, that brings those more to more even units. I found like the Scottish cavalry was extraordinarily effective compared to everything else, just because it's so fast. And I never saw a point to dismounting it at all. Likewise, never saw much of a point to converting those guys to infantry. All right, let's send this one up.